What happens when trust is shattered in a relationship and a seemingly harmless mistake turns into a betrayal? It was supposed to be a typical week. I had a short business trip scheduled, just 4 days away from home. Mia, my fiancée, and I had talked about it the week before. Everything seemed fine. She was even joking about having the whole house to herself while I was gone, saying she'd binge-watch some shows I couldn't stand and order takeout until she couldn't move. Typical Mia stuff, really. But looking back now, there were signs. Small things that seemed insignificant at the time, but in hindsight, they practically screamed at me. The night before I left, Mia was acting a little off. Not in a dramatic, obvious way, but there was something different. She kept bringing up the spare rooms. Casual comments about how we might need to reorganize one of them, clear out my old gym stuff, and turn it into a proper guest room. Later, she mentioned how nice it was to have the extra space just in case. I laughed it off. Who are we expecting, royalty? I said, thinking nothing of it. But she didn't laugh. Instead, she gave me this tight smile and said, "You never know." I didn't think much of it then. Mia's family can be a lot to handle, and she knows I'm a little protective of my space. I've had this house for a couple of years before we even met, and while she's living here now, I've always made it clear that I value my boundaries, especially when it comes to her family. Her dad's the kind of guy who borrows your tools and forgets to give them back. Her mom once asked me to co-sign a loan for her after I'd met her twice. And her younger brother? Well, he's 24, jobless, and seems to think freeloading is a life goal. I love Mia, but her family? Not so much. As I packed my bags for the trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just slightly off. Mia, usually so relaxed, was a little too focused on those spare rooms. But I pushed it out of my mind. After all, everything was normal, right? It wasn't long into my trip before I started noticing the first signs that something wasn't quite right. The first red flag came when I received a call from Mia. Her voice was unusually upbeat, too upbeat almost. She sounded like she was putting on a show, trying to sound cheerful. But there was a slight edge to her tone that I couldn't quite place. "Hey babe," she said. "You won't believe who stopped by for dinner tonight. My parents were in the area, so I thought I'd invite them over. We had a great time." I was taken aback. Her parents? They lived 2 hours away. They weren't the type to pop in unannounced, especially on a random Tuesday night. I tried to keep my voice steady, not wanting to sound paranoid. "Oh, really? That's a bit unexpected," I said, trying to mask my surprise. "I thought you were just going to have the house to yourself. Did you give me a heads up about this?" She quickly brushed it off with a laugh, almost too quickly. "Oh, I didn't think it'd be a big deal. They were just passing through, you know? It was fine. They didn't stay long. So, how's the trip going? Have you had time to check out the hotel gym?" I didn't know how to respond to that. Mia was usually pretty straightforward, but her sudden cheerfulness felt forced. I let it slide, not wanting to make a big deal out of nothing. Maybe I was overthinking it. The real unease set in the next day. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Lisa, my neighbor. "Hey, just checking in. I've noticed a lot of cars at your place the past couple of days. Everything okay?" My stomach dropped. A lot of cars. What did that even mean? Mia had only mentioned her parents stopping by for dinner, so why were there multiple cars? I quickly texted Lisa back. "What do you mean by a lot? How many cars?" She replied almost immediately, "I think there are about 3 or 4 cars parked out front now. Saw some people unloading bags yesterday." "Bags? What bags?" I called Mia right away, my pulse quickening as I waited for her to pick up. She answered on the second ring, but I could hear a slight catch in her breath, like she was caught off guard. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Lisa mentioned seeing a lot of cars at the house. What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end before she finally answered. "Oh, it's just my brother and his girlfriend. They're helping me clean out the garage. Nothing to worry about." My gut twisted. Mia's brother was the last person I'd expect to be helping with anything. If he was at my house, it wasn't to lend a hand. But I didn't press her further. Not yet, anyway. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, telling myself I was probably overreacting. But as the day went on, The discomfort in my chest only grew. Something wasn't adding up, and no matter how hard I tried to dismiss it, I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that I was being kept in the dark. By the time the evening came around, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know what was really going on back home. I didn't give Mia a heads up. I didn't even tell her I was cutting my trip short. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When I pulled into the driveway that night, everything felt off. The lights were on inside the house, and there were two unfamiliar cars parked outside. My heart began to race as I grabbed my suitcase and walked toward the front door, unsure of what I was about to find. I opened the door, expecting to find an empty house, maybe Mia on the couch watching TV, but what I saw stopped me in my tracks. Mia's parents were sitting on my couch like they owned the place, laughing at some ridiculous reality show. Her dad had his feet up on my coffee table and her mom was flipping through one of the magazines I keep in the guest bathroom. And then I saw him, Mia's younger brother, Jake, sprawled out in one of my recliners, holding a beer like he'd been there for weeks. There were suitcases stacked near the front hallway, scattered around the living room like they'd just moved in. I stood there for a moment, suitcase in hand, unable to process what I was seeing. The sound of the TV in the background felt surreal. I didn't know if I was still dreaming or if I had really just walked into my own home to find Mia's entire family making themselves at home. It was Mia's dad who noticed me first. His eyes flicked to the door and a smirk spread across his face. "Oh, hey, look who's home early," he said, like it was the most casual thing in the world. Mia, who had been sitting on the couch with her mom, froze. Her face went pale as she turned toward me. You're home early," she stammered, standing up quickly. "Yeah," I said, my voice low, barely holding back the anger bubbling up inside me. "What the hell is going on here?" Mia took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Well, it's just that my parents' house is, unlivable right now. There's some construction going on, and I thought it'd be fine if they stayed here for a few days. It's just temporary." "Just temporary?" My eyes scanned the room, taking in the pile of luggage by the door, the casual way her dad was lounging on my couch like it was his own. Nothing about this situation seemed temporary. "You thought it'd be fine?" I echoed, my voice rising now. "You didn't think it was worth mentioning to me before you made this decision?" Mia looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "I didn't want to stress you out while you were away. It didn't seem like a big deal." "It's a big deal, Mia," I said, stepping forward. "This is my house. You don't just invite your family to stay without asking me first." Her father chimed in, standing up from the couch and acting like he was doing me a favor. "Look, man, we're family, right? Family helps each other out. This is just temporary. What's the big deal?" The audacity of this guy. My patience snapped. "The big deal is that no one asked me. You don't just show up uninvited and start unpacking your bags in my house like you own the place." Mia's mom, who had been quietly flipping through the magazine, finally looked up with a sickly sweet smile. "Oh, honey, we didn't want to bother you while you were away," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Mia said it would be fine. She said you'd understand." I turned to Mia, anger clouding my judgment. "Did you say that? Did you tell them it was okay for them to just move in?" She hesitated, then mumbled, "I didn't think it would be a big deal. I thought you'd come around once you saw how harmless it was." I could feel my blood boiling. I had made it clear from the beginning that I valued my space, that I didn't want her family pushing their boundaries in my home. And yet here they were, acting like they had every right to be here. "Harmless?" I repeated, disbelief coating my words. "Mia, you lied to me. You knew I wouldn't be okay with this, so you waited until I was out of town to pull the stunt." Her dad's face hardened. "You're being ridiculous," he said, dismissing me with a wave. "This is family. Mia lives here too, doesn't she? She has a say in who stays here." "No," I shot back, glaring at him. "This is my house. I bought it, I pay for it. And I don't care if Mia lives here. She doesn't get to make decisions like this without talking to me first." The tension in the room was suffocating. Mia's eyes were wide now, her face flushed with embarrassment, but she still didn't seem to grasp the gravity of what she had done. Jake, who had been silently observing the whole thing, let out a quiet snort. "It's not like they were going to stay forever. Just a few weeks," he muttered, almost too casually. "A few weeks?" I echoed, turning toward Mia, the anger now fully evident in my voice. "You told me this was just for a few days. And now it's weeks." Mia finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped as she sighed, looking like she was defeated. "Okay, fine," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The construction at their house is going to take at least 2 months to finish. They didn't have anywhere else to go, and I thought it would be easier if they stayed here. I didn't think you'd mind." "You didn't think I'd mind?" I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Mia, you know how I feel about boundaries. And yet you thought I'd be okay with this? Mia's face flushed with anger. What was I supposed to do, say no? They had nowhere else to go. Yes, I snapped. Or at least ask me first. At least respect my space and my decision. The room was dead silent. The weight of her actions hung heavy in the air, and I realized that everything we had built in this relationship was starting to crack. Trust was shattered, and Mia's explanation wasn't enough to repair it. I'm done, I said, finally, my voice firm. Everyone needs to leave. Now. I turned on my heel and headed for the door, knowing full well that this would be the moment everything changed between us. I could feel the heat rising in the room, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Mia stood there, wringing her hands, trying to act like this was some minor issue that could be easily brushed aside. But I wasn't having it. I wasn't going to let her downplay what had just happened. Mia, I said, my voice sharper now. This isn't something you can just sweep under the rug. You invited your entire family to stay here without even asking me first. And now you're acting like it's no big deal. This is my house, Mia. My space. And you've completely disregarded that. She sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. I told you, it's just temporary. You're overreacting, Alex. My parents don't have anywhere else to go. It's not like they're staying forever. I could feel my jaw tightening. That's not the point, Mia. You made a decision for both of us without consulting me. You're telling me this is just a few days and now it's a few weeks? Who decides that without talking to their partner first? She crossed her arms over her chest, her tone defensive. I didn't want to stress you out while you were away. I thought it would be fine. You always say you want me to make decisions, to take charge. But then when I do, you blow up at me. The nerve of her. Making decisions is one thing, I shot back. But there's a difference between making a decision and blindsiding your partner. This isn't just about whether or not I'm okay with your family staying here. It's about trust. Communication. You're ignoring my boundaries, Mia, and that's not okay. Her eyes narrowed. You're just being controlling, Alex. You always want to have everything your way. It's like nothing I do is ever good enough for you. My breath caught in my throat. That was the last thing I ever wanted to hear. Controlling? I'm not asking for the world, Mia. I'm asking for respect. I'm asking for communication. Why is that so hard for you to understand? At that moment, her father, who had been sitting silently on the couch, finally spoke up. His voice was condescending, dismissing everything I had said. Look, Alex, he said, standing up and gesturing around like he owned the place. This isn't a big deal. We're family. Mia was just trying to help us out. And you? You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. I stared at him, my hands clenched into fists. This is my house, and you don't just get to waltz in here because you're family. I don't care if you're Mia's parents. You have no right to treat this like a hotel without asking me first. His eyes flicked over to Mia, then back at me, dismissing me with a shrug. You're being unreasonable. Mia's just trying to help. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I could feel the pressure building inside me, and I turned back to Mia, trying to keep my voice calm, though it was nearly impossible. Mia, do you hear yourself? You're so focused on keeping the peace with them that you're ignoring the fact that you're tearing apart our relationship. She shook her head, the defensive walls she'd put up becoming thicker by the second. You're overreacting, she muttered. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of something so small. I told you it's temporary, and I'm doing what's best for my family. What's best for your family? I repeated, feeling my heart pound in my chest. What about what's best for us, Mia? What about respect? What about the promises we made to each other about boundaries and communication? She looked away, her lips tight, and in that moment I saw it. The divide. It wasn't just about her parents staying here anymore. It was about something deeper, something that had been building between us for a while, and neither of us wanted to face it. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm not going to keep fighting for my space, for my boundaries, and for our relationship while you let your family walk all over them. This isn't just about this situation, it's about everything that's been happening. Mia's face twisted with frustration. So what now, Alex? You're going to throw everything away over this? Over something so small? Is it small to you? I shot back, my patience running thin. Because to me, this is about respect. If you can't see that, then maybe we need to rethink this whole thing. I could see her struggling. She wanted to defend herself, but she knew deep down that she couldn't justify what she'd done. The weight of it all was suffocating us both. We were stuck in a cycle of blame, neither of us able to truly understand where the other was coming from. And in that moment, the tension between us reached a boiling point. Neither of us had expected this confrontation to go the way it did. I thought I could trust her, and she thought I would just go along with everything. But we were wrong, and now everything was on the table. The fragile walls we'd built were starting to crumble, and there was no turning back. Maybe we should take a break, I said, my voice cracking as I finally admitted the thought that had been in my mind for too long. Maybe we need to figure out who we really are, because right now I don't know if we can even have a healthy relationship anymore. Mia didn't respond, and the silence that followed felt louder than any argument we'd had. We were standing on the edge of something neither of us wanted, but both of us knew was inevitable. The house was eerily quiet after Mia's family left. The silence felt heavy, suffocating, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to break. I couldn't escape the weight of what had just happened, no matter how hard I tried. I moved around the house, trying to go through the motions, pretending things could go back to normal. But they couldn't. Nothing could ever be the same again. Mia, on the other hand, seemed determined to act like everything was fine. She came downstairs the next morning like nothing had happened, making coffee and scrolling through her phone. The casual nature of it all hit me harder than I expected. How could she just brush this off? Hey, she said, not even looking up from her screen. I know last night was intense, but can we just move past this? It wasn't a big deal. I felt the frustration bubble up inside me, choking off any patience I had left. Not a big deal? I asked, my voice steady but tight. Mia, you invited your parents to move in without telling me. You didn't even ask if it was okay. You ignored my boundaries completely. How's that not a big deal? She set her phone down and looked at me, her face unreadable. I didn't think it was that serious, she said, shrugging like it was no more than a minor inconvenience. I thought you'd understand once you saw how harmless it was. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like she wasn't even listening. Harmless? I repeated, taking a step toward her. You thought it would be harmless to bring your entire family into my house without even asking me? Do you even hear yourself, Mia? She sighed, turning away as if the conversation was too much for her. I just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I didn't want to stress you out while you were away. Her words hit me like a slap to the face. She hadn't cared about stressing me out. If she had, she wouldn't have blindsided me like this. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice shaking now. This isn't just about your family staying here. It's about trust. You broke that. You've broken something between us, Mia. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she just stared at me, her eyes avoiding mine. I could feel the distance between us growing, thickening like a wall I couldn't tear down. I was trying to understand her, but the more I tried, the more I realized she wasn't trying to understand me. The days that followed were like walking through a fog. We didn't talk about it anymore. Not really. Mia kept repeating how it wasn't a big deal, and I kept feeling the knot in my stomach tighten every time she did. It was as if we were speaking different languages, and every word between us just deepened the divide. I started to wonder if I was even capable of fixing this. Could I really move past the fact that she had made such a huge decision without consulting me? More importantly, could I trust her again? I didn't know. The idea of being in a relationship where I constantly had to defend my space, my boundaries, made me question everything. What kind of future did we have if we couldn't communicate honestly? If I couldn't trust her to respect the simplest things, how could I trust her with something bigger? Every time I looked at Mia, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. She was still here physically, but the emotional connection we once had seemed to be slipping away. And it scared me. There were moments when I thought we might be able to fix things, that maybe this was just a bump in the road. But then I remembered the look on her face when she dismissed my concerns. The way she made me feel like I was the one overreacting, like my feelings didn't matter. The way she never once acknowledged how deeply she'd hurt me. One night, as I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where Mia's family had been just days ago, I realized something. This wasn't just about her family moving in. It was about a deeper issue, our lack of communication, her disregard for my boundaries, and the way she always tried to downplay my feelings. I was starting to see that this wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. And I didn't know if I could live with it anymore. The emotional distance between us had become palpable. There was a heaviness in the air, like we were both pretending to be okay, but neither of us really was. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but every time I tried, the words got stuck in my throat. The hardest part was realizing that we were no longer the same people who had fallen in love. The connection we once shared felt like a distant memory, fading with each passing day. And as the silence grew between us, so did the realization that I didn't know how much longer I could live in this emotional limbo. The days that followed were nothing like what I had hoped. Mia tried to act as if everything was okay, but I couldn't ignore the distance between us. The way her attempts at normalcy only highlighted how broken we had become. The quiet tension in the house was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of the unspoken words between us growing heavier by the hour. Every time I looked at her, I saw a stranger. A stranger who didn't understand me anymore. A stranger who didn't see how much this had hurt. It was one evening after dinner when Mia finally broke the silence. She sat down across from me, her hands trembling as she folded them on the table. Her eyes met mine, but there was something cold in them now. "Alex," she said, her voice steady but pleading. "I've been thinking maybe we could let my family come back. Just for a little longer. We can set some boundaries, some rules, you know? It doesn't have to be like before. I'll make sure they don't overstay their welcome. Please, just give it another chance." I felt my heart sink as her words washed over me. I wanted to scream, to tell her how much this had torn me apart, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I looked at her, the woman I once thought I would spend my life with, and realized that I couldn't do this anymore. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. "This isn't about your family, Mia. It's about the fact that you thought you could make decisions for both of us without even asking. You betrayed my trust. You violated the boundaries we were supposed to respect." Her eyes flashed with frustration, but this time I wasn't afraid of her anger. "I didn't think it would be a big deal," she said, her voice rising. "You're acting like I did something horrible, but I was just trying to help. I didn't want to stress you out, Alex. You're always so worried about boundaries, so I tried to do what I thought was best. But you're making me feel like I'm the villain here." "I never said you were the villain, Mia," I replied, my voice breaking, "but what you did was a betrayal. You've broken something between us that I can't ignore. You never took responsibility for your actions. You just kept deflecting, acting like everything would be fine if we just kept pretending. But we can't pretend anymore." Her face twisted in anger and hurt, but I could see the desperation in her eyes, too. "Maybe the problem is you, Alex," she snapped. "Maybe you're too controlling. Maybe you don't know how to let people help, to let things go." Those words hit me harder than I expected. It felt like she was throwing all the blame on me, just like she had with everything else. "Controlling?" I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. "You think I'm controlling for wanting basic respect? For wanting you to communicate with me before you make decisions about our lives? This isn't about control, Mia. This is about trust. And you shattered it." For a moment, there was silence. Mia sat there, looking at me like she couldn't understand how we had gotten here. How we had gone from being in love to this. But I had no answers. I couldn't make her understand. I couldn't change what had happened. And in that moment, something inside me broke. I realized that I had been holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. The love I had for her had been eclipsed by the hurt, the betrayal, and the realization that we were no longer the same people we once were. We had drifted so far apart that I didn't know if we could ever find our way back. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I can't keep fighting for a relationship where trust has been broken and respect doesn't exist. I thought I could forgive you, but the truth is I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Her face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flash of vulnerability in her eyes. But it was too late. The decision had been made. You want to break up?" she whispered, the pain in her voice cutting through me like a knife. I nodded, unable to say anything more. "I'm sorry, Mia. I really am. But this isn't something we can fix. The trust we had, it's gone. And I can't pretend like everything's okay anymore." The room felt like it was closing in on us, the weight of those words hanging in the air, suffocating us both. Mia stood up, her face pale, her hands trembling. I don't know what to say," she whispered, taking a step back. "You're really going to throw everything away? Over this?" I felt a pang in my chest, the finality of it all sinking in. "I'm not throwing everything away, Mia. I'm just accepting that this is over. And I think deep down, you know it too." She didn't say anything else. She just turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the wreckage of everything we once had. And in that moment, I realized how much pain could come from love. How much damage could be done by neglecting something as simple as trust. I had fought so hard to make it work, but in the end, I couldn't fight for something that wasn't there anymore. The engagement was over. Mia was gone. And I was left standing in the empty silence, the pieces of my heart scattered around me. And all I could do was let go.